So in this video, we have a special guest. His name is Gregory. He is an engineering manager at booking.com. In this video specifically, we're going to talk about his career journey on how he became an engineering manager and his challenges he faced when transitioned to a management role, as well as how to go from a SDE to an engineering management role. So welcome, Gregory. Thank you very much for having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Real pleasure to be here.
Now, throughout this video, if you have any comments or any feedback or any video ideas that you'd like to see me making in the future, please comment down below. Awesome. So Gregory, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an engineering manager. I started my career as a software developer. I was specializing in backend. I used to write Ruby code for almost 10 years, and I traveled a little bit. So I worked in a number of countries. I started my career in Poland, where I'm originally from. Then I lived for a while in Spain, a bit in Germany. I spent a couple of years in Asia, specifically in Singapore. And currently I work in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, where I work for booking.com here in the headquarters.
Got it. So the first question that we have for you is your career journey. So can you tell us a bit more about how do you get started? What do you do before engineering manager?
Yeah, sure. So after university, even when I was a student, actually, I got a part-time job at the software house. I was writing some small Ruby on Rails applications. It was around 2010. So Ruby was on the rise. There were lots of web applications being created. It was before Node.js and JavaScript were that popular. So people were using PHP, Ruby, and Python. Yeah. So I worked a bit for a software house. Then I joined a couple of startups. So I worked for a company called Flywire. Right now, it's a public company based in Valencia in Spain, where I went for a student exchange. So I spent a couple months there. I worked for a while in advertising tech in Germany. All of this was mostly backend development. Like, back then, the frontend was not that popular. Like, frontend was very simple. It was just HTML with some jQuery sprinkled on top. So there was no frontend role really. So what I was doing was technically full stack, but like vast majority of the logic was on the back end, and the front end was much simpler. Then after a while, I moved. I took a break from work. I took around 1 year break. I decided to travel a bit, take kind of a gap year. I did some freelancing here and there, but I was mostly traveling. And when I traveled through Southeast Asia, I decided that I wanted to stay there for a while. And I found a job in Singapore. It was in a travel technology industry. So I joined this very small startup. I was first or second engineer hired there. And, I didn't expect much from it because it was startup. Most of them fail. But I stayed there for years, and I went from a senior developer position through lead developer. And eventually at some point, the company got so big that our CTO couldn't handle managing all the developers. So we decided that since I was the most experienced developer, but also the person who was in the company almost since the beginning, then I would become the role was titled head of engineering, but it was really engineering manager. At this size of the company, there are no many levels. So it's equivalent of engineering manager in larger companies. So that's how I kind of transitioned from developer to manager. Then when I left Singapore, I decided to go back to Europe. I went for a bit back to individual contributor role, but I decided that I want to explore the possibilities in management more. So I went for a couple companies, mostly startups, as an engineering manager. Eventually I landed at booking.com, where I work in the core platforms department. So we are building mainly internal tools for other developers at the company.
I see. So one question that I have is, why do you make the transition from a tech lead or a team lead or engineer lead as an individual contributor to a engineering management role? Why do you make that transition? What motivates you?
This was the case that kind of the company needed that, right? Like I never, before I did that, I never thought, hey, one day I want to be a manager. I actually felt very good as a developer. I thought that I would continue in that role. But over time, I noticed that in the company where I worked for, like I could make a bigger impact if I help other developers write better code. So, I could write if I wrote really great code, it was still a limited number of lines, it was still kind of limited impact. And then I got involved more in teaching others, in coaching. I was running internal workshops. I was still leading the projects technically, but I wasn't writing that much code anymore. And I realized that, hey, I can have a bigger impact by helping other people grow. If I make 10 people better developers, that's way better than if I keep just writing code myself the whole time. So that's how and also, as I mentioned earlier, the company just needed someone to manage developers, and I decided to give it a try. And over time, I realized that, that this is something that that I'm happy with. I believe I'm kind of a decent manager. I still can code. I occasionally do some pair programming, etc. But yeah, I decided that I enjoy this work, and I'm going to follow this career, the career path, at least for the time being.
So can you tell us a bit more about what's your responsibility as an engineer manager? And I noticed that in the past you worked at a startup company and also a bigger tech company. Can you tell us a bit more about the differences for the engineer manager responsibility?
So in startups, like in smaller companies, often the engineering manager is just one person. If you have 20 developers, then usually you have CTO and maybe one other manager or team lead to help. And this role is, I would say that it's not very well defined. I was the first engineering manager in a company that I worked for. So, when you start in a role that didn't exist before, then you don't know what it is really about. And it was first time for the company to have engineering manager. It was first time for me to be engineering manager. So I didn't really know what I should be doing. The company really didn't know what exactly I should be doing. Like, we had some kind of an idea that I should be managing developers, but we didn't have a very clear separation between me and the CTO, who was my direct supervisor. So it took us a while to figure out what is the work that only he can do and what is the kind of work that I can help him, with. So eventually we decided that he would take like more of a big picture perspective. He was working with a lot of external partners. He was also co-founder of the company, so he was involved in funding and this kind of stuff. And I would be taking care of all the day-to-day operations. So I was managing the team. I was the direct manager of all the developers in the company, and I was responsible for the team. He was responsible for everything else besides that. But that was just one company. Then in another company that I joined, there were already a couple of managers, so the role was clearer. I had a dedicated team, and my responsibility was making sure that the team knows what they need to do, why they are doing it, and that they know how to do it. So that was more straightforward. Now that I work for an even larger company, it's also even better defined, because there are hundreds, probably, I don't even know. I guess there are like hundreds of managers in the company. So you have a lot of people that went through this path, and I can learn from them to understand what does it mean to be an engineering manager in Booking.com specifically. So I'd say that the biggest difference for me is that in the bigger company, the role is well defined. Also, you have other people around to support you. So for example, some larger companies have agile coaches or scrum masters. And then if you have a dedicated person to do that, you do not have to act as a scrum master. The same with product manager, the same with tech lead. In one of the roles, I didn't have I had a product manager, but there was no scrum master. So I had to act as a meeting facilitator. There was no tech lead. So I had to either find some senior developer and help them become a technical leader. But for the time being, I had to act as a tech lead. So I would say that in smaller companies, it's like you don't have that many people to help you around. So you need to wear more hats. In bigger companies, but again, I don't have that much experience with larger companies, but I guess that in bigger companies, because you have more people, more different roles, and more people dedicated to specific tasks, then your role as engineering manager is more clear, and it's more dedicated towards people management.
Do you prefer working at a startup as an engineer manager wearing many hats, or do you prefer working as an engineer manager in a big tech company, have a clear responsibility for what to do?
Oh, that's a great question. So right now I enjoy working at a big company. This is the first time that I'm in such a big environment, and I enjoy this kind of work also because I have a lot more support. Like, I think that I have a lot of resources to understand how to be a better manager and a lot of people to learn from. So that's definitely a good thing. But I think also earlier in my career, it was great to do it in a smaller company because I had a lot of opportunities to learn not only about people management, but I could learn about the business because I was very close with the founders of the startup. When they are like 10 people in the company, you're naturally much closer to everyone else. So I learned about the business. I learned about managing people, the technical excellence, etc. For now, I think I enjoy working in a larger company, having this structure, but that's probably because it's something new to me. And I guess maybe in like 2 or 3 years, I would say, okay, no, I miss this chaos and this, the vibe of a startup, because it's very different. In a large company, it rarely happens that you do something totally unexpected, right? Like, I don't know, in a smaller startup, maybe I need to help customer service because we have an influx of calls, right? So like, it's all hands on board. Everyone also has bigger impact. You can suggest something that will get implemented and that might become a big idea that will help the company. While in such a big company as Booking.com, I'm just part of one of many departments, right? So I guess in some time I would like to go back to startups. But yeah, for now I enjoy this corporation style.
Got it. Awesome. Now, my next question is, what kind of challenges do you face when transition to a management role? Is it a really smooth transition, or do you think there's also some learnings or some challenges that we have to experience?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of challenges, and some of them depend on the company that you're at, and some of them are purely because of the role change. So that as a manager, your goals and what you're responsible for changes. Like as a developer, I know clearly how to evaluate myself, right? I write code, I compile this code, I see that it works, that's great. Then it's being tested, reviewed, I improve the design, and I see at the end of the day that my code is in production and that it works, and that's the goal that I'm trying to achieve. Now, as a manager, I don't really know what I'm responsible for. At least in the beginning, it wasn't clear to me, right? Because I used to be a developer and now I'm a manager. So should I still be writing code? Should I be only managing? Is it 50-50? So the challenge is that it is a career change, right? And you need to find yourself in this new role, and you need to figure out how to do it well, and what you should be focusing on, right? Also, the learning curve and the feedback loop is very different. As a developer, again, like I used to be a web developer. So whenever I save the file, I refresh the website, I could clearly see whether what I'm doing works or not.
Yeah.
As a manager, I don't know whether what I'm doing is working or not, because I'm talking to people, I'm managing them, but I don't see immediately whether what I'm doing works. Sometimes it takes a week, sometimes it takes months to see whether what I did made sense or not. Sometimes it happens that I talk to my direct reports and I think everything is going well, but because of miscommunication, because of the cultural differences, because of tons of different reasons, I might be seeing things very differently than my report. So it's harder to see whether I'm doing my job well or not. And I think it also requires a lot of self-reflection, right? Like as a manager, I need to have certain skills. I need to be better at time management. I need to be assertive. I need to communicate well, etc., etc. And some of these skills it's harder to figure out what I'm not very good at. If you have a good mentor, if you had a good manager to support you through this transition, then that's much easier. But again, in a smaller company, it might be missing. Large companies have trainings for management, for managers. They have a way to support you throughout the whole transition. Even before you become a manager, you can get some trainings, you can get a mentor, etc. In smaller companies, there is no structure around you to support all of these. So I would say that there are lots of challenges, and some of them probably are easier if you are in an environment where lots of people went through this transition, but some of them just require a lot of self-reflection, understanding what you're good at, accepting that you're not good at certain things, and trying to improve them. Also improving those skills, right? Like, let's say I want to improve my communication skills. How do I do it? Like, how do I see whether I'm better or not? It's harder to evaluate these skills, much harder than evaluating programming skills.
Could you also clarify a bit more about what kind of goals or expectations should an engineer manager achieve?
Basically, my team is responsible for writing code, for delivering features, but I'm accountable for all of this together. This is one thing. I need to ensure that my team just builds what we are supposed to build. Second, I am responsible for ensuring that people can grow. So I am kind of accountable for people's satisfaction at work, right? Like, if people get bored, they see that we don't have challenging work, then they are more inclined to leave. So if people are staying in the company, if people are getting promoted over time, if people get better roles, more challenging tasks, then it means that I'm doing my job well. If I have high turnover in my team and people are leaving and trying to go even to other teams in the company just not to work with me, then that obviously means that I'm doing something wrong. So that's I would say that these are the most important things. But again, the rest depends on, on people around you, right? If, for example, you do not have technical lead in your team, then as a manager, you are also kind of responsible for the technical excellence. If you have someone that is experienced, that is a technical lead, then you're not directly responsible that, then you can delegate it. I would say the most important part is the people management. If the people are growing, if the people are satisfied with their work, and if the people deliver what the company expects us to deliver as a team, then I would say that these are the basic expectations for an engineering manager.
Got it. Now, my next question is, how can someone transition from a SDE to an engineer manager?
Yeah, so as always, there are two ways. One is to get promoted or transition with the same company. The other is to join a new company and to change to that role. I would say that the second way is way more difficult. Some people get promoted via changing company, right? Like from junior developer to developer, from developer to senior. Like the company can give you a higher title when you join a new company. But I believe very few companies will hire you as an engineering manager without proven leadership experience in the past. So I would say that doing this transition within a single company is much easier because when you change a company, you change the domain, you change the environment, and that's already a lot to learn. And if you still need to learn everything about management, about leadership, that's just a lot. So I would say that staying in the same company and getting promoted or transitioning, depending on the company, whether it's a promotion or career change, that depends on companies. But I would say that staying in the same company is much easier. And I would say that the first step is always talk to your current manager and say, hey, at some point I would like to become engineering manager. For me, that's like the step one. If people around you know that you want to become a manager at some point, then they will create, or they should at least try to create environment around you to help you with that transition. If you never tell anyone that you want to be a manager, then people will assume that you don't want to. Therefore, they will not be looking for opportunities for you to lead initiatives, to lead people, and they will not be thinking about you when they consider people for management positions. So I would say that the first step is always talk to your manager and say, hey, maybe not now, maybe in a year, 2 or 5, I want to be an engineering manager. Then the second thing is that you, of course, need to be a good developer. Most of the engineering managers I know, not all, but most of them have some developer background. And of course, you need to first have certain amount of experience. I've never seen a junior developer becoming engineering manager. Mid-level developers, maybe it's possible, but it must be extremely rare. So probably you need to get to a senior position or have at least a couple years of experience, and then from there you can go to management. The next thing I would say is look for different opportunities to lead things before you become, because engineering manager is also kind of a leader, right? Like there's a difference between management and leadership, but as an engineering manager, you need to lead the team. And before someone gives you the officially position that you are a leader, you need to start leading initiatives. You need to start leading people without this official title. So look for opportunities to lead some projects, to lead some initiatives. It doesn't have to be always technical thing. It might be leading some small research. You might be leading some workshops. It might be organizing some self-study, some study group to go together through some course, etc. I think that proactivity matters a lot in this case. And then, depending on the company, again, like if your company doesn't have that position because it's too small, then of course it will not happen. But if you tell your manager here at some point, I want to become a manager, then when the company grows and when there are opportunities, when there is a chance to take that leadership position, then they will consider you. In larger companies, there are probably open opportunities always, so then you can maybe apply internally. Again, talk to your manager, understand how does it look like. Is it considered a promotion? If it's considered a promotion, then maybe you only can do it, once a year in the promotion cycle. In some companies, it's not a promotion; it's transition from senior developer or from staff developer. You are moving to the other track, to the management track. So understand how it works in the company, because maybe it's very ad hoc, but maybe it's a very structured process. So it's good to prepare. It's good to prepare in advance. Yeah, and I would say that you need to understand whether, like, I would say that all these things should lead to making a decision whether you actually want to do it, right? Like if you start leading people, if you start organizing some stuff in the company, take some initiatives, then you will also understand whether you actually want to become a manager, because it's a very, very different role than a developer. So it's good to do some stuff before you formally become manager. It's good to learn how to do it and whether it's actually something that you want to do. Because as a manager, you will not be coding 50, you will not be coding even 30% of the time. Sometimes you might be coding just like 1 hour a week, or even not code for a couple of weeks. And a lot of developers don't want to do that, and they are not ready to do it. They think that, okay, as a manager, I will be promoted, I will be making possibly more money depending on the company again, but they are not ready to stop coding, right? So I think it's important to try these kind of things, the leadership, and to ask yourself, okay, do I want to switch from engineering to engineering management? Because it's a really very, very different thing.
Got it. So just to sum up, basically trying to have a clear goal so that everybody around you understands your goal, and also demonstrate that leadership experience, and also learn about the engineer and manager responsibilities and related skills. Could you also clarify a bit more about the interview process look like? How's it different compared to just a regular
Right. Bigger companies have very structured interviews. And from my experience with larger company, from interviewing at larger companies, it's kind of like interviewing for software developer position, plus there are leadership questions on top of that. When interviewing for developer positions, the interview is usually the most common thing is some lead code or hackathon questions, plus some system design interview. At least that's like a senior developer thing. Plus, of course, you've got like a culture fit, etc. But the technical part of the interview is coding and system design. Now, for engineering manager, the coding and the system design are important, but at least when it comes to programming, you're not expected to deliver as well as when you're a developer. Like interviewers and the companies, like, they're aware that as a manager, you won't be coding that much. And probably if you were already a manager before, then you don't code so much anymore. Therefore, they don't expect you to solve these questions as quickly, or they don't expect you to provide optimal solutions. What's more important usually are the leadership questions. And there are like tons of different questions. There are like whole books written on this topic. But usually they revolve around a number of situations that you dealt with in the past and how you dealt with them. So it's usually like, the question is like, have you ever dealt with underperforming report? And yes, if yes, how did you do that? Or how did you deal with a project that was about to fail? What did you do to save this project? And this kind of stuff. And now that's why it's difficult to join as an engineering manager, join a new company if you have never done this before, because you don't have these examples to show from your career. If you've never led a project, if you've never led people, right, then you cannot say how you dealt with someone who was underperforming, because you never had someone directly reporting to you who was underperforming. So that's why I think that these are it's much easier to first get some leadership experience at your current company and then start interviewing. And they are like, this leadership is usually, like from my experience, like 1 or 2 hours. Sometimes there are like 2 interviews like that, and it's mostly about different questions about how you dealt with standard challenges. Like, okay, how did you solve a conflict? How did you work with a difficult product manager or something like that? And it's usually in this, I don't remember what it stands for. There is this format called STAR, which is like situation, task, action, result, right? Something like that. Yeah. So you need to say, okay, this was the context, this was the task that I had to do, this is what I did, and this is how it turned out. And some people really don't like it, but it's like a very basic concept. And yeah, if someone's interviewing for engineering manager position, I always recommend people think about a number of like highlights from your career as a manager. Think about a number of difficult projects, difficult people. You will not be prepared for all the questions, right? Because the questions might be very different. But if you think about a project and reflect on it, then you will find a lot of things to say about it. So even if you don't think about a specific question, if you think about a project that was difficult, then whenever you are asked some question, then you can think about, okay, maybe this project, because it was a big difficult project, so maybe I can talk about it and then connect it.
Got it. Now, when you interviewing for engineering manager role, how many, I guess like how many interviews do they have for coding or system design? How many interviews do they have? Like you mentioned, behavioral interviews where they ask you some leadership questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of your personal experience, could you tell us a bit more about how many rounds of coding interviews, how many rounds of system design interviews, and behavioral interviews does it have for an engineering manager?
So I've seen a wide range. Once I got a role without any technical interview. Like there was maybe a bit of a technical discussion, but was very basic. So it was like, I had a couple interviews like that where I didn't have to write a single line of code. I did some system design, but it was very basic. But it's in smaller companies. In larger companies, there was at least one coding interview, at least one system design, and then one or two interviews related to leadership. Sometimes this one interview is like with higher level manager, like senior engineering manager or directors, and one with maybe HR. So I would say that on average it's like four rounds, excluding the initial call with the recruiter.
Yeah. Now, could you also tell us a bit more about what kind of resources do you recommend for someone to prepare for the engineering manager interview? And also, I noticed that you mentioned earlier that reflecting on your previous work experience to, gather these situational questions, right, for the behavioral rounds. Could you also tell us a bit more about how to prep for the, the coding, the system design, as well as maybe some management or leadership, questions?
So I would say that first understand what is the interview process at the company that you're interviewing for. Like ask in advance, hey, like big companies usually have some preparation package for candidates. Like companies like Google, for example, they will tell you first it's coding, then system design, then something else. So then which part you should focus on. And then you can think, okay, if I haven't coded for a while, then maybe I should, brush up my coding skills and practice lead code. But yeah, so that would be the first thing. Probably the leadership part is more important. So that's something that people are not, it's more difficult to prepare, I think, because like coding, again, it's you visibly see whether you're getting better at it, right? If you practice lead code, then you can clearly see, okay, a month ago, it took me half an hour to solve average, medium question. Now I can do it in 20 minutes. Therefore, I am clearly better. Now, when it comes to talking about leadership and about your past experience, it's harder. So you can do some mock interviews. You can read. There is a book. I think the title is like Engineering Manager Interview, something like this. The book contains like 100 questions that you can think of, and then you can go through these questions and think whether you can easily come up with an answer. But I would say focus on some big projects from the past. Focus on like the highlights, dealing with big challenges. Because if you had something challenging, then there are lots of questions that you can connect to that challenge and to talk about. Of course, if you haven't done a lot of coding, if you haven't done a lot of architecture, then just practice those skills. For the system design, there are courses, there are books that you can read. And one good piece of advice that I've heard from someone before was just interview with a couple companies that you don't really plan to join, or maybe you don't expect to pass the interview, as a kind of a practice, right? Because it just takes time to understand what is the flow of the interview, how will it look like. Don't start with your dream job. It's better to first go through a couple companies, and then once you realize, okay, I know how it looks like, I am not so stressed anymore because I know what to prepare for, then you can apply interview for that dream job.
Now, awesome. So Gregory, do you have any final words or any final advice that you would like to give to the audience? Actually, one question. So I noticed that you're also a content creator, a YouTuber. Can you also tell us a bit more about your YouTube channel? What kind of content do you post on there, and how can audience benefit from that?
Thanks for mentioning that. So I run a channel called Not Only Code, and I also run a blog with the same title. It's notonlycode.org, and I write. On the channel, I started by the idea was that I want to help developers to have more successful career. I've never had a mentor as a developer, and I thought that a lot of people are in a similar situation. Therefore, maybe if I talk about how to become a better developer, what to focus on, then I could at least partially fill that gap and help other people who also never had a really good manager or a mentor. But over time, I also started talking a bit about engineering management. So my recent videos are about how to become a leader, how to prepare for engineering manager interview. That's something that I did last year. And that's like, I haven't recorded anything for a couple of weeks, but the next videos that I have planned are on similar topics. It's how to run a successful team, how to become better as a manager. And similarly on my blog, I cover kind of similar topics. So I talk a bit about the leadership. I collect some articles and other resources for engineering managers. Sometimes I write something more technical, but mostly I focus about how to become a good engineering manager, a good technical leader. I think that the position of engineering manager is still something new. When I started my career, I didn't have engineering manager. I've never heard this title until like 5 or 6 years into my career. And I think that it's still kind of new. People are trying to figure out, especially in smaller companies, they're trying to figure out what exactly should it be and how we can help developers who are, natural, like nobody studies computer science to become a manager, right? Most people who become developers do it because they're good technically. And then you move from primarily technical position to primarily people management position. And that introduces a lot of challenges. There are a lot of questions. And I think that it's still not clear for a lot of people how to do that, how to practice that, how to understand that, yes, I am a good manager. So I'm via my blog post and my channel, I'm trying to help people to make this journey, this transition a little bit smoother.
Awesome. Like any last words or any final words or any advice that you would like to say?
Yeah, so I would say that being an engineering manager is giving me at least a lot of satisfaction. And I think a lot of people, we as developers are often kind of negative towards management because we often see managers as, less technical, not understanding what we as developers are working on, etc. Becoming an engineering manager can help to change that. So if someone is wondering, okay, should I become an engineering manager? I would say give it a try. It's a very different role, but it's also technical role. It has a pretty good career path, and it can help to bridge that gap between the management, the less technical management, let's say, and developers. I think that right now this position is becoming very popular because lots of companies realize that, hey, we actually cannot just have developers report to someone non-technical because it just doesn't work. So this position, I think it's becoming more important, more popular. So there are a lot of opportunities to become a leader as a software developer. And even if you've never considered yourself an extrovert, even if you've never considered yourself a natural leader, I think it's worth giving it a try. You can always go back to the developer role. I did that in the past. I became a manager, then I moved to individual contributor role, and then again to management. So it's possible to move between these two tracks. But yeah, I think that there are lots of challenges for engineering managers. And if you feel that you can change something, that you can make life better for developers in your company, it's worth giving it a try.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you very much, Gregory, for attending this show.
Thanks, Eric. Once again, thank you for the invitation. It was great chatting with you. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. This is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching this far. Now, if you're interested to see more of this content, please consider like and subscribe this channel.